I hope that myself and lots of people who have suffered the same way, both mothers and fathers, can move out of the grief and we can get restoration and healing for not just the missing parent, but the missing grandparents, the missing aunts and uncles, the missing cousins. The big network, this was what used to be society's primary social support. And now half of that is taken away and is just being destroyed. And so the government is taking on more and more of this social need. And I think that we have to ask our politicians to make sure that the laws they make don't separate children from their parents, either of them. Even people who are in jail are entitled to see their children. But there's so many people who have done nothing wrong and they lose total contact just as I have. So I want the laws to change so that it's impossible for those breakdowns to happen. Because we need as a society, if we're going to be strong, if we're going to build on the future, and we're not going to just rely on government, then we have to recognise that the core of any society is the family, and not just a small family, the whole extended family. And that we have to work on having the system changed. And at the same time, there's many, many families that have been destroyed where the kids are now adult children, and those adult children with their grandparents still need to be healed and still need recovery and still need reconciliation. And we need processes in place to reconcile these people, to get them together again, to rebond the family. And it'll be difficult because there's so many false beliefs from both sides. But we're trying to build a strong society that looks after each other and looks after their friends. And we have to make sure that no government policy or no government law will undermine that. That has to be stopped. After all my experiences of pain, of isolation, of loss, and knowing that this happens to lots of mothers and fathers, and that the loss is far greater than just losing a parent, it's losing an entire network. You lose your in-law, the grandparents on one side of the family, you lose the cousins, you lose the aunts and uncles. You essentially lose half of their support system. And we need to correct that. In many cases, and mine, those children have been with a parent who they've had to live with every day, who they've had to get by with, and who they've had to bond with their ideas. So it's the best way of describing, and described in much literature, is they're suffering from the Stockholm Syndrome. They have the ability to move forward. They have the skills to move forward as they get older, but they don't do it because all the factors of the Stockholm Syndrome are affecting their relationship with the missing parent and families. And that needs to be healed, and that needs to be recognised. And we need to have a government that is going to ensure that whatever happens, that their laws are watched and monitored so that we're looking at humane outcomes that are good for the society. What I would do differently looking back on it all is, if I knew then what I know now, I would have stayed in the abusive relationship, because I think the pain for myself and my children would have been far less than their separation from each other. And I see no other option, and I think that's a sad indictment on our system, when we say that we shouldn't expect people to be in domestic violence, yet we don't give them safe options. I went to the courts thinking that they would protect me, and they did the opposite. I've actually written 3 books. This is my first one, A Lioness from Judea Roars, and I wrote this for cathartic reasons up front, just because I wanted to let go of the pain. I wanted to write it down. I didn't want to hold on to those stories that I wanted to tell my children. I wanted them to hear them, and be able to read them anytime they wanted. But I didn't want to hold on to it because it just kept me in that dark place. After it was written, a friend convinced me to publish it so that I could share it with others who had been through the same experience and needed to know that they weren't alone, they weren't unique, particularly mums, and lots of these have gone to women's refuges. Because mums are all surprised that so many of us are going through this situation of losing our child or children. I also wanted it there so that people who are lucky enough not to have had this experience can understand or get a feel of what it's like. Because unless they understand and unless they support change, nothing's going to happen. These children and parents and family destructions are just going to keep on going. So, and my long-term goal is that the system changes and that these families are reunited and that the parents are reunited with their children, their adult children, and that systems are put in place for it, and that politicians will change laws that will reinforce the strength of the family, not splinter it. So that was the point of the first book. 2 years later, in 2012, I wrote my second book. My second book was really my ideas on how the system can be changed, because I was tired of people at dinner parties and elsewhere sort of saying, well, what would you do to change the system? And this way, I don't destroy the dinner parties. I can just say, read the book if you really want to know, and we can keep on having fun, because it is a pretty heavy topic. But then I kept on thinking, well, how can Australia have changed from a country that supported what I thought as a child, the underdog, to essentially kicking the underdog? And so I kept on saying, well, what changed? What happened? What happened back in the 80s when all of this changed? So I did lots of research. And when I came across something that I felt had to be written, and that was my third book here, published around 2015. And it was just my research into how things went wrong, where have things gone wrong. And surprisingly enough, I came across the Australia Act, which made Australia a republic, where we were no longer dependent on Britain, or they could make no rules for us, and we couldn't go back to them. We couldn't go back to Britain and say, can you look into this problem in our country? And yet Australians believe we're not a republic. And that worries me. That worries me that we have politicians from all parties who must have known about this. And yet here we are, close to 20 years later, more than that. And they're still talking about, should Australia be a republic, or should it be still dependent on Britain? And yet they changed it many years ago.
I know it will not